They fined me $120,000 for a house I legally owned. I spent 8 months rebuilding a forgotten lakefront estate with my own hands. Then a stranger showed up with a bill from 1976 like I owed them my land. Something didn't add up, and the deeper I dug, the worse it got. If you want the full story and how it really turned out, stick with me. And if you believe in standing your ground, go ahead and subscribe. The first quiet morning I had on that porch felt earned. 8 months of dust, busted knuckles, and wiring that looked like it belonged in a museum, finally behind me. The wraparound boards creaked under my boots as I stepped out with a mug of black coffee, steam curling into the cool Montana air. The lake stretched out in front of me, flat and clean, catching the early light like polished glass. No traffic, no noise, just the low call of loons somewhere across the water. For the first time in a long while, nothing was broken. Not the house, not the land, not me. I leaned against the railing I'd sanded down by hand 3 weeks earlier, running my fingers over the smooth wood. When I bought this place, it smelled like rot and standing water. Windows boarded, roof sagging, wiring that could have burned the whole structure down if I'd flipped a switch. Everyone in town called it a teardown. I didn't see a teardown. I saw bones that hadn't quit yet. And now, standing there, I could finally admit I'd brought it back. The gravel at the end of the drive cracked under tires. I didn't turn right away. Most folks who came out this far did it slow, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to be there. This car came in fast, engine pushing harder than it needed to. A silver sedan, clean, out of place against the dirt and pine. It stopped too close to the house. The engine idled for a second, then cut. The door opened with a sharp click, and a woman stepped out like she was already late for something. Mid to late 50s, hair set just right. Clothes that looked casual if you didn't know what they cost. She didn't look at the lake, didn't look at the house, just walked straight up the path like she'd been there 100 times before. I set the mug down on the railing. She didn't say hello, didn't introduce herself. She walked right up the porch steps, reached into a leather folder, and pressed a manila envelope into my hand like it belonged there. "You'll want to take care of that promptly," she said, voice smooth, rehearsed. 30 days before additional penalties apply. I looked down at the envelope. My name was printed clean across the front. No return address, no explanation. I opened it right there. The paper inside was thick, official-looking, headed with something that called itself Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. Beneath that, a breakdown of charges. My eyes landed on the number first. $52,000. I blinked once, like maybe I'd read it wrong. Then I followed the line above it. Outstanding dues and assessments, accrued from 1976 to present. I let out a short breath through my nose. 1976, I repeated, not looking up yet. "That's before I was born." She smiled at that. Not a friendly smile. The kind that stays tight around the edges. "Ownership carries responsibility, Mr. Caldwell," she said, "whether you were aware of it or not." I looked up then, meeting her eyes. "Who are you?" "Diane Whitaker," she said, "president of the HOA." I glanced past her, out toward the lake, then back to the paper. "There's no HOA on my deed." Her smile didn't move. "That's a common misunderstanding with legacy properties," she said. "Paperwork gets overlooked, especially when previous owners weren't keeping up with community obligations." "Previous owners," I said slowly. "You mean the ones who let this place rot for 15 years? She tilted her head slightly, like that detail didn't matter. "Obligations don't disappear just because a property changes hands." I flipped through the pages. Fee schedules, interest calculations, Late penalties stacked on top of each other like someone had been waiting a long time to collect. "You're telling me," I said, "I owe 52 grand for something nobody's ever billed this house for?" "We've exercised patience," Diane replied. "But now that the property has been restored, it's appropriate to bring it into compliance." There it was. Not about the past. About now. About the fact that the house didn't look abandoned anymore. I folded the papers once, keeping my eyes on her. "I did my due diligence before I bought this place," I said. "Title search. Insurance, county records, not one mention of your association." Her expression hardened just a fraction. "That doesn't exempt you from participation," she said. "It just means the correction is overdue." "Correction," I repeated. "Yes." She took a small step back, like the conversation was already finished in her mind. "You'll also see a monthly assessment listed moving forward," she added. $350, payable beginning next cycle. I let out a quiet laugh, but there wasn't anything funny in it. "You're serious, very." The wind shifted off the lake, carrying that clean water smell up onto the porch. A minute ago, it had felt like something I'd earned. Now it just sat there between us, like a reminder of what was at stake. "You've got 30 days, she said. "After that, we'll have to explore enforcement options. Liens. Legal action. I'd prefer to avoid that." "Yeah," I said. "I bet you would." She turned without another word, heels clicking across the boards I'd just refinished. Walked down the steps, back to her car, like she'd just finished dropping off a package. The engine started again, loud in the quiet. Gravel kicked up as she reversed, then pulled out of the drive without looking back. I stood there with the envelope in my hand, listening until the sound of the car faded into the trees. Then it was quiet again. Same lake, same porch, same house I'd spent 8 months dragging back from the edge. Only now there was a number sitting in my hands that didn't belong there. $52,000, dated back to a time when this place had nothing to do with me. I looked down at the pages again, slower this time. The letterhead, the language, the way it was written like it had weight, like it expected to be believed. Out on the water, a ripple moved across the surface, catching the light. For a second, everything looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes ago. But it wasn't. Because now there was a question sitting in the middle of it all. Why would an HOA demand 50 years of dues from someone who never agreed to be part of it? And more importantly, who else had they done it to? I didn't sleep much that night. The papers sat spread across my kitchen table under a single overhead light. My deed, title insurance, survey maps, every document from the purchase, clean, verified, stamped. I went through them again, slower this time, line by line like I was looking for something I'd missed the first dozen times. Nothing. No HOA clause, no easement language, no reference to Willowbrook Estates or Diane Whitaker or any organization that could claim $1 from this land. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my eyes. If they had authority, it would be in the chain of title. That's how it works. You don't just invent jurisdiction because it suits you. But that invoice hadn't been written like a bluff. It had been written like a demand. By morning, I was in my truck headed into town. The county records office sat in a low brick building that smelled like paper and old carpet. The kind of place where time didn't move fast and nothing got thrown away. If there was something tied to this property, it would be here. The clerk at the counter looked up when I stepped in, glasses low on her nose. "Can I help you? I need everything tied to a parcel out on Blackwood Shore," I said, sliding over my property ID, ownership, restrictions, associations, anything filed since the 70s. She glanced at the number, then back at me. "That old place?" she said. Thought nobody was living out there. Someone is now. She gave a small nod, like that explained something, and disappeared into the back. I spent the next 2 hours at a metal desk flipping through scanned records, transfers, tax filings, survey updates. Nothing pointed to an HOA attached to my land. The only thing I found was a cluster of filings in the mid-1970s, formation documents for something called Willowbrook Estates Association. But the boundary map attached to it didn't include my parcel. I tapped the screen again, zooming in, making sure I wasn't reading it wrong. The line stopped short of my property. Clean. Deliberate. I printed it anyway. When I walked back to the counter, the clerk raised an eyebrow. "Find what you were looking for? Depends," I said. "You ever see an association try to collect dues from outside its own boundary?" She let out a quiet breath, not surprised enough for my liking. "More than you'd think," she said, "especially when land changes hands. So they just send a bill and hope nobody checks?" "Most people don't," she replied. "They see legal language, assume it's legit, and pay to avoid trouble." I folded the printout once, slipping it into my jacket. "Yeah," I said. "Well, I'm not most people." Back at the house, the quiet didn't feel the same. I stood on the porch again, looking out over the lake, but now there was something else sitting under the surface. A sense that the place I thought I'd secured wasn't as isolated as it looked. The mail truck came just after noon. I didn't think much of it until I saw the envelope, certified. I signed for it, already knowing what I'd find inside. Same letterhead, same tone. Only this time, the language had sharpened. Final notice of outstanding obligations. They'd added penalties, interest recalculated, a new total, higher than yesterday, and a line in bold. Failure to remit payment within 30 days will result in lien placement against the property and initiation of legal enforcement proceedings. I read it twice, slower the second time. Then I noticed something else. CC, local residents, compliance notification. I stepped out to the edge of the porch, looking down the drive. Across the tree line, I could just make out the roof lines of a few neighboring properties. Not close, but close enough. Close enough for word to travel. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I let it ring once before answering. "Yeah." A man's voice on the other end, hesitant. This Ethan Caldwell? Depends who's asking." Pause. "Name's Mark. I live up the ridge about half a mile east of you. Figured I'd give you a heads up." "About what?" Another pause, longer this time. "They're saying you're in violation," he said. "HOA posted something in the community board this morning. Said you're refusing compliance and it could affect property values." I stared out at the lake, jaw tightening. "That's so, yeah," he said. "Didn't sound right to me. That place of yours? Looks better than it has in 20 years. Appreciate that. Just thought you should know," he added. "They don't usually move this fast unless they think they've got something." I glanced down at the letter in my hand. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." We hung up. I stood there for a long moment, the paper crinkling slightly in my grip. They hadn't just sent me a bill. They'd already started building a case against me in public, framing it like I was the problem, like I owed something to a system I'd never agreed to. I went back inside, laid the new letter next to the first one, and set the county map beside them both. 3 pieces of paper. 3 different stories. One said I owed $52,000. One said they had authority over me. And one, filed decades ago, said they didn't. I leaned over the table, hands planted on the wood. If I wasn't part of them, how were they acting like I was? And more importantly, what were they planning to do when I didn't pay? I found out faster than I expected. The next morning, I drove into town for supplies. Wire connectors, conduit straps, a few things I still needed to finish the last details on the dock lighting. Nothing complicated, just work. But the moment I stepped into the feed store, something felt off. Conversations dropped. Not all at once, not dramatic, just one voice fading, then another. A couple of guys near the counter glanced my way, then looked back down like they'd suddenly gotten interested in the floor. I walked past them anyway, boots steady on the worn planks, grabbed what I needed, and set it on the counter. The kid behind the register hesitated before ringing me up. "You're the one out on Blackwood Shore, right?" he asked. "That's right." He nodded slowly, like he was confirming something he'd already heard. "Didn't think anyone was going to fix that place." "Neither did most people," I said. He forced a small smile, but it didn't stick. "Yeah," he said. "Guess some folks got concerns." I didn't respond, just watched him bag the parts. "HOA put something up this morning," he added, quieter now. "Community board by the gas station." I took the bag from him. "What kind of something?" He shrugged, but his eyes didn't meet mine. "Compliance notice. Said there's an issue with a property out by the lake. Didn't name you outright, but everyone knows." Of course they did. I paid cash, didn't wait for change, and walked back out into the lot. The sun was higher now, burning off the early haze. Same town, same buildings. But the air felt different, like I'd stepped into a place where a story had already been written about me, and I hadn't been asked to tell my side. I drove straight to the gas station. The board was mounted on the side wall, next to the ice freezer. Flyers, lost dog notices, church events. And right in the center, printed clean and bold: Community Compliance Alert. Willowbrook Estates. I stepped closer. It didn't name me, didn't need to. Recent property activity within the lakeside boundary has failed to meet established community standards and obligations. Non-compliance may result in legal action, financial liability, and negative impact on surrounding property values. Below that, a line in smaller print: Residents are advised to remain informed and report any irregularities to HOA leadership. I read it twice, clean, polite, vague enough to avoid legal trouble, but pointed enough that anyone reading it would know exactly who it was about. I pulled the paper off the board, folded it once, slid it into my jacket. Let them notice. The gravel lot was quiet as I walked back to the truck, but I could feel it. The shift, the weight of eyes, even when nobody was looking directly. By the time I got back to the house, I wasn't surprised to see the tire marks. Different from Diane's sedan. Bigger, wider. Someone else had been out here. I killed the engine and stepped out slow, scanning the property. Nothing broken, nothing moved. Just the sense that I wasn't alone in this anymore. I walked up onto the porch, set the parts down, and froze. There was another envelope on the door. This one taped dead center at eye level. No attempt to hide it. I peeled it off, already knowing the weight of the paper inside. Violation notice. Failure to submit to HOA compliance review. Fine, $500 per day. Effective date. Retroactive to the start of renovation. I did the math without meaning to. 8 months. 240 days. My jaw tightened. $120,000. For fixing a house they had no authority over. I looked out across the property, past the fence line, toward the tree line where the neighboring parcels started. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was pressure. Layered. Planned. Meant to build fast and heavy until it forced a decision. Pay or break. My phone buzzed again. Different number this time. I answered without speaking. A woman's voice came through, sharp but controlled. You received the updated notice? Diane. Yeah, I said. I got it. Good, she replied. Then you understand the urgency. I glanced down at the paper in my hand. You're stacking fines now. We're enforcing standards, she corrected. There's a difference. There's also a boundary, I said. One your own formation documents say you don't cross. Silence. Not long, just enough to register. Then her voice came back, cooler. Documents can be interpreted, Mr. Caldwell. Not that one. You'd be surprised what holds up in court, she said, especially when a property has benefited from community proximity without contributing. I let that sit for a second. Community proximity, I repeated. That what you're calling it? You've increased the value of your property, she said, which impacts everyone around you. That creates an obligation. No, I said. Ownership creates rights, not obligations to people I never signed with. Her tone sharpened just a degree. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Funny, I said. Feels like you already decided that before you showed up on my porch. Another pause. Then, we have mechanisms to resolve non-compliance, she said. Liens, legal filings, restrictions on use. My grip tightened on the phone. Restrictions on use? Yes. What does that mean? It means, she said carefully, that access, improvements, and certain utilities can become complicated when a property is in violation. There it was. Not just money. Control. I looked out at the lake again. At the dock I'd rebuilt. The lines I'd run underground. The system I'd wired myself. You planning to shut me down? I asked. I'm planning to bring you into alignment, she said. One way or another. The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, phone still in my hand. Then I set it down on the railing, picked up the violation notice and laid it flat on the table inside next to everything else. The deed, the county map, the letters, all of it building into something bigger than a dispute. This wasn't about a bill anymore. It was about whether they could make it real. I rested both hands on the table, leaning over the documents. You don't belong here, she'd said without saying it. But she'd made one mistake. She'd pushed too fast, too hard. And now I knew something I didn't yesterday. They weren't just asking for money. They were preparing to take control of something they didn't own, which meant the next move wasn't about arguing. It was about proving exactly where their reach ended and making sure they couldn't pretend otherwise. They didn't wait long to push it further. 2 days later, I was halfway through installing the final exterior conduit run along the back wall when I heard tires again. Not one vehicle this time, 2. I stepped down from the ladder and wiped my hands on a rag as a white SUV pulled up beside the drive, followed by a pickup I didn't recognize. Diane Whitaker stepped out first. Same composed look, same controlled smile. But this time she wasn't alone. A younger guy climbed out of the truck behind her, clipboard in hand, wearing a polo shirt that said Inspection Services like it had been printed that morning. Diane didn't wait to be invited. We're here to conduct a compliance inspection, she said, already walking toward the house. I didn't move. On what authority? I asked. She stopped at the base of the steps, just enough to acknowledge the question without answering it. This property is under review for multiple violations, she said. We're documenting the current condition. I looked past her to the kid with the clipboard. And you are? He straightened slightly. Todd Whitaker, he said. Certified building inspector. I nodded once, slow. Certified by who? His grip tightened on the clipboard. State certified, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Then you won't have a problem showing credentials, I replied. Diane stepped in before he could respond. That won't be necessary, she said. We're not here to argue procedure. Funny, I said, because that's exactly what you're trying to bypass. She exhaled through her nose, patience thinning. Mr. Caldwell, refusing inspection only strengthens our position. No, I said. It just means I don't let strangers walk my property pretending they have authority they don't. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Todd shifted, pointing vaguely toward the side of the house. We've received reports of unpermitted electrical work, he said. That poses a safety risk to surrounding properties. I almost laughed. Unpermitted? I walked past them, into the house, and grabbed the folder sitting on the kitchen table. When I came back out, I flipped it open and held it up. County permits. Signed. Stamped. Inspection approvals. Passed. Every line I've run, I said, tapping the papers, has been inspected and cleared by the county. Not your HOA, not you. Todd glanced at the documents, then back at Diane. She didn't even look. Our standards exceed minimum code, she said. That's what protects property values. Your standards don't apply to me, I said. They do if you're within our boundary. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the county map I'd printed, folded it open right there on the porch railing. Your boundary ends here, I said, pointing to the line that stopped short of my land. This parcel isn't included. Todd leaned in, squinting at it. Diane didn't. Maps can be outdated, she said flatly. This one isn't. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she shifted tactics. We'll note your refusal to cooperate, she said, and proceed accordingly. Do that, I replied. They turned to leave, but not before Todd pulled out his phone and snapped a few pictures. Wide shots of the house, the wiring, the dock line running down toward the water. Documenting. Building something. They drove off without another word. I watched the dust settle behind them, then looked back at the house. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Different number, I answered. Caldwell. County Building Department, a voice said. Older. Tired. We've received a complaint regarding unpermitted electrical work at your property. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course you have. We'll need to send someone out to verify compliance, he continued. You can send whoever you want, I said. They'll find everything up to code. Appreciate the cooperation, he replied. We'll be out this afternoon. I hung up, jaw tight. They weren't just testing boundaries anymore. They were leveraging systems, using official channels to make it look legitimate. The county truck showed up 3 hours later. Different man this time. Late 50s, sun-worn face, steady eyes. He stepped out slow, like he'd done this job long enough to know when something didn't add up. Ethan Caldwell? He asked. That's me. He nodded once. Name's Mike Jensen. Got a complaint about your electrical work. Come take a look, I said. I walked him through everything. Panel, runs, junctions, exterior lines. He didn't say much. Just checked, measured, scribbled notes. When he finished, he closed the panel and stepped back. Who filed the complaint? He asked. HOA, I said. He let out a quiet breath. Figured. I crossed my arms. Everything up to code? He looked at me, then back at the house. Better than most new builds I see, he said. You know what you're doing. I do. He nodded again, slower this time. You're gonna get more of these, he added. I already figured that. He hesitated, then lowered his voice just enough. Off the record, he said. You're not the first one they've targeted like this. I felt something shift in my chest. Who else? He glanced back toward his truck, then back at me. Couple years back, a guy named Turner out past the ridge, he said. Same pattern. Complaints, inspections, pressure. He ended up selling. Cheap? Mike didn't answer. Didn't need to. He turned to leave, then stopped. Keep your paperwork tight, he said. That's what matters when it gets real. I watched him drive off, the county truck disappearing down the road, slower than the others had. Different kind of presence, different kind of weight. I stood there on the porch again, looking out at the lake, but my focus wasn't on the water anymore. It was on the pattern. The inspection wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about code. It was about creating a record, stacking complaints, building pressure, making it look like I was the problem until I either paid or walked away. I went back inside, laid Mike's inspection report next to the rest of the documents. Clean, clear, official. Then I looked at the violation notice again. $120,000 in fines for a property they didn't control. I rested both hands on the table, steady. They'd made another mistake. They'd brought the county into it, which meant now there was a paper trail that didn't belong to them. And if there was one thing I understood better than wiring, it was how systems worked when you pushed them too far. Because now I knew something for certain. I wasn't the first, and if I didn't stop it, I wouldn't be the last. That thought stuck with me longer than anything else. Not the bill, not the fines, not even Diane's voice on the phone. It was the pattern. Turner out past the ridge, forced out after the same kind of pressure. Complaints stacked until the fight cost more than the land was worth. I needed to see that pattern for myself. That afternoon, I drove east along the ridge road Mike had mentioned. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to a narrow dirt track that wound through scrub and fence lines, the kind of road that only exists if you already know where you're going. Turner's place wasn't hard to find, or what was left of it. The house stood back from the road, but it wasn't lived in anymore. Windows dark, porch sagging slightly at one corner, not abandoned, but not held onto either. A fresh for sale sign leaned near the gate, below market. I didn't need to check a listing to know that. I killed the engine and stepped out, boots crunching over dry ground. The wind carried dust across the yard, thin lines drifting over the same kind of fencing I'd repaired on my own property weeks earlier. Someone had fought here and lost. Looking for something? I turned. An older man stood near the neighboring fence line, one hand resting on the post. Late 60s, maybe. Weathered, steady eyes, the kind of face that didn't waste words. Just passing through, I said. He studied me for a second. You're the one out on Blackwood Shore, he said. Word traveled fast. That's me. He nodded once, slow. Figured you'd come out this way eventually. I stepped closer, stopping a few feet short of the fence. This place belonged to Turner? I asked. Used to. What happened? The man glanced toward the house, then back at me. Same thing that's happening to you, he said. Only he didn't see it early enough. I didn't say anything, just waited. They hit him with compliance notices first, the man continued. Said he'd made improvements without approval. Then came the inspections, then the fines. Sound familiar? I said. He let out a dry breath. By the time he realized they didn't have jurisdiction, he'd already spent months fighting paperwork. Legal fees started stacking. Bank got nervous. He had a loan against the place. I felt my jaw tighten. They pushed him into default. The man nodded. Didn't have to take the land, he said. Just had to make it too expensive for him to keep it. I looked back at the house. Solid structure. Good land. Worth holding, if you weren't being squeezed out of it. Who bought it? I asked. LLC out of state, he said. But everyone knows who it ties back to. Diane. Didn't need to say it. I stepped back slightly, taking in the fence line again. Clean, straight, maintained. You ever have issues with them? I asked. The man gave a small, humorless smile. I keep my head down, he said. Pay what they say. Don't give them a reason. That work? For me, he said. So far. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. But you, he added, you didn't come in quiet. I thought about the porch, the restoration, the way the house had gone from abandoned to visible in less than a year. No, I said. Guess I didn't. He nodded again, like that confirmed something. They don't like that, he said. I turned back toward my truck. Appreciate the information. He didn't stop me. Just remember, he said as I opened the door, they don't need to be right. I paused. They just need you to believe they are. I drove back toward the lake slower than I had on the way out. Turner wasn't a one-off. He was a blueprint. And if that was the case, there were more. That night, I didn't sit on the porch. I sat at the table with the documents spread out again, but this time I added something new. A legal pad. I started building it out. Timeline. Day 1. Demand letter. Day 3. Certified notice. Day 5. Public posting. Day 7. Inspection attempt. Day 8. County complaint. Each step layered on top of the last. Not random, structured. I wrote one word at the top of the page. Escalation. Then I circled it. Because that's what this was. A system designed to apply pressure in stages until the target either complied or collapsed, and I was right in the middle of it. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number from before. Mark. You hear about the meeting? He asked. What meeting? HOA's calling an emergency session, he said. Community center. Couple nights from now. I leaned back slightly. What's the agenda? Officially, he said. Community standards. And unofficially? Pause. You, he said. I looked down at the timeline in front of me. They were moving faster now. Public pressure phase. Get the room on their side. Frame me as the problem before I could prove otherwise. When? I asked. Thursday night. I checked the calendar on the wall. 3 days. Appreciate the heads up, I said. Careful walking into that, he added. They'll have people ready. I figured. We hung up. I stared at the table again, at the pattern laid out in ink. They thought they were ahead. They thought I was reacting. But they'd made another mistake. They'd turned it public too early, which meant I had a window, 3 days to build something stronger than their narrative. 3 days to find what they didn't want anyone else to see. I closed the folder slowly, stacking the documents into one clean pile. Then I grabbed my keys. Because if Turner was the pattern, then somewhere in this county, there were records that proved it. And I intended to find them before Thursday night. The courthouse opened at 8. I was there at 7:52. Same building, same smell, same fluorescent hum overhead. But this time, I wasn't looking for confirmation. I was looking for leverage. I went straight past the front desk and into the records room, pulled up the terminal, entered the parcel numbers I'd written down the night before. Turner's, a couple others Mark had mentioned offhand, and mine. 3 properties, 3 timelines. I built them side by side. Turner's started clean. No HOA references for decades. Then suddenly, letters. compliance notices, filings, all within a 6-month window. Same pattern. Another property, Mitchell. Same thing. Quiet ownership, then a spike in activity. Notices, complaints. Then a lien, sold 8 months later, below market. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen. It wasn't enforcement. It was activation. They weren't maintaining rules. They were turning them on when it suited them. And when they did, it was fast. Coordinated. Designed to overwhelm before anyone could respond properly. I printed everything. Timelines, filing dates, notice copies, anything that showed the shift. Then I went deeper. Back to the original HOA formation documents from 1975. The clerk had mentioned them before, but I hadn't pulled the full file. This time I did. Articles of incorporation, initial bylaws, boundary maps. I flipped through them slow. Then I stopped. There it was again. The boundary line. Same as the map I'd printed earlier. Clean cut. My parcel outside it. Not ambiguous. Not faded. Clear. Deliberate. I flipped to the amendment section. One document stood out. Filed 2 years after formation. Amendment to Charter. I opened it. The language was tighter than the original filing. More specific. Properties existing prior to the formation of the association and not explicitly included within the defined boundary shall remain exempt from all assessments, obligations, and enforcement actions unless written consent is provided by the owner. I read it twice, then a third time. Not just excluded, protected. I looked at the signature line. Harold Whitaker. Diane's father. I let out a slow breath. They didn't just lack authority over my property. They had documented proof they never had it, and they'd signed it themselves. I printed that too. Carefully. Kept the original formatting intact, because that wasn't just a defense, that was a weapon. By the time I stepped out of the courthouse, I had a folder thick enough to matter. But I wasn't done, because documents don't win on their own. You need someone who knows how to use them. Rachel Kim's office sat above a hardware store on Main. No big sign, just a small plaque on the door. Property law. Land use. I knocked once and stepped in. She was behind the desk, mid-40s, sharp eyes, no wasted motion. The kind of person who didn't need to raise her voice to control a room. "You Caldwell?" she asked. "That obvious?" "Word travels," she said. "Sit." I laid the folder on her desk. HOAs trying to collect 50 years of dues from my property, I said, and enforce fines they don't have jurisdiction for. She opened the folder without reacting, flipped through the pages, stopped at the amendment, then looked up. "How long have they been pushing?" she asked. "About a week? And they've already issued fines?" "6 figures, I said. "And they're talking liens." She nodded once. "Fast," she said. "Pattern," I replied. "Not just me." She went back to the documents, flipping between the timelines I'd printed. "Turner," she said, reading the name. "Mitchell. You know them?" "I know the outcomes," she said. "Didn't have this." She tapped the amendment with her finger. "This changes everything." That's what I figured. She leaned back slightly. "Legally, they can't enforce against you if you're outside the boundary and explicitly exempt," she said. "But that doesn't mean they won't try. They already are." She nodded. "Then we don't react," she said. I looked at her. "That's it?" "We build," she corrected, quietly. She pulled a legal pad closer, writing as she spoke. "Step 1. We document every action they've taken. Notices, complaints, inspections. Already started. Good. Step 2. We establish your compliance with county law. Permits, inspections, everything clean. Done. Step 3, she said, tapping the amendment again. We hold this. I frowned slightly. Why? Because once you show it, she said, they'll shift, deny, delay, try to bury it. So we wait? We let them commit, she said. Fully. I thought about the meeting. Thursday night. They're calling a town hall, I said. Her pen paused. Perfect. That's where you want this? That's where they want control, she said, which means that's where we take it from them. I leaned back in the chair, considering it. You're telling me to let them keep pushing, I said. I'm telling you, she replied, to stop fighting on their terms. The room went quiet for a second. Then she added, silence makes people overconfident. I thought about Diane, the speed, the pressure, the way she'd escalated without hesitation. She already thought she had me cornered. All right, I said. We build. Rachel nodded once. And Ethan, she added, looking up from the page. From this point on, you don't talk to them unless we say so. I stood, gathering the folder. Not even if they show up again? Especially then. I paused at the door. They're trying to take control of something they don't own, I said. She didn't look surprised. They always are, she replied. I stepped back out onto the street, the late afternoon light cutting across the buildings. The pressure hadn't gone away. If anything, it had tightened. But for the first time since Diane showed up on my porch, I wasn't reacting. I was building something they couldn't argue with. And they had no idea yet. Because from this point on, I wasn't fighting them. I was letting them walk straight into it. By Wednesday morning, the pressure didn't slow down. It multiplied. Another certified letter hit the mailbox before 9. Then a second. This one marked final escalation notice. The language had shifted again. Less polite. More certain. Failure to comply will result in immediate lien filing and legal enforcement. They were accelerating, which meant they thought I was close to breaking. I didn't respond, didn't call, didn't write back, didn't even acknowledge receipt. Instead, I documented everything, every envelope, every timestamp, every line of language that assumed authority they didn't have. Rachel had been clear. Let them commit fully. So I let them. Around noon, Diane showed up again. This time she didn't bring the fake inspector. She came alone. I saw her car from the porch and didn't move to meet her, just stayed where I was, leaning against the railing, letting her come up the steps. She stopped about 6 feet away. You've been quiet, she said. I didn't answer. Her eyes scanned the property. Fresh paint, clean lines, everything exactly as I'd built it. You understand where this is heading, she continued. We're prepared to file a lien as early as Friday. Still nothing from me. Her expression tightened slightly. Most people would at least try to negotiate by now, she said. I pushed off the railing slowly. Most people aren't being billed for something that doesn't exist, I replied. Her jaw set. It exists, she said, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. I took a step closer, stopping just short of her space. You've been running this play for a while, I said. Push fast, stack pressure, make it look official enough that people don't question it. Her eyes flickered for half a second, then steadied. You're making assumptions, she said. No, I replied. I'm noticing patterns. The air shifted. Not dramatic, just enough. She changed direction. You've already been identified as non-compliant, she said. That affects more than just you. The community has expectations. Community doesn't include me, I said. It does if your actions impact property values. There it is again, I said. You keep saying that like it creates jurisdiction. It creates responsibility. No, I said. It creates an excuse. That landed. She took a small breath, recalibrating. Thursday night, she said. Community meeting. You should attend. I tilted my head slightly. That an invitation? It's an opportunity, she said, to explain yourself. I almost smiled. Yeah, I said. I think I'll take that. She nodded once, like that confirmed something she expected. Good, she said. Because once this moves to legal enforcement, things get more complicated. Only for one of us, I replied. She held my gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked back to her car. Didn't look back this time. Didn't need to. She thought she had control. Thought Thursday was going to be a formality. I watched her drive off, then went back inside. The folder sat on the table where I'd left it. Deed. Boundary map. Timeline. And the amendment. I pulled it out again, flattening it under my hand. Clear language. Clean signature. Harold Whitaker. Her father. The man who built the system she was now using. And the same man who'd written the line that made my property untouchable. I picked up the phone and called Rachel. She's filing by Friday, I said when she answered. Good, she replied. That's good? It means she's committing to a position she can't defend, she said. And she's doing it publicly. I glanced at the amendment again. She invited me to the meeting. I expected that. She wants me in the room. Rachel paused for a second. Then we make sure you're not alone in it. I leaned against the table. What does that look like? It looks like timing, she said. You don't open with anything. You let her build her case first. And then we take it apart piece by piece, she said, with documentation she can't dismiss. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Walter? I asked. I'll reach out, she said. If he's willing to confirm historical boundaries, that strengthens everything. He will, I said. He's seen what happens if he doesn't. Good, she replied. Then we're not just defending, you're exposing. I hung up and looked around the room. Same table, same documents. But the weight had shifted. This wasn't about whether I owed them anything anymore. That question was already answered. This was about proving they knew it too, and had acted anyway. I stepped back out onto the porch, the boards steady under my boots. The lake was still there, calm, unchanged. But the quiet didn't feel the same as it had that first morning. It felt sharper, focused, because now everything was moving toward one point. Thursday night. One room. One moment where their version of the story either held or collapsed completely. And for the first time since this started, I knew exactly which way it was going to go. The community center sat just off the main road, a low building with a gravel lot that was already filling up by the time I pulled in. Thursday night, right on schedule. SUVs lined up in neat rows, a few pickups scattered between them, but most of the vehicles looked like they belonged to people who preferred rules written by someone else. I killed the engine and sat there for a second. Not hesitation, just focus. Then I stepped out. The air carried low conversation, clusters of people already forming near the entrance. A few heads turned as I walked up, voices dropping just enough to notice. Same pattern as the feed store. Only now it was organized. Inside, the room was already packed. Folding chairs set in rows. A long table up front with a projector screen behind it. Diane stood near the center, speaking with a group of people who nodded along like they'd heard this version before. She saw me the moment I stepped in. Didn't react. Didn't need to. This was her room, her setup, her narrative. I took a seat near the back, not hiding, just not participating yet. A few faces I recognized from around town, others I didn't. But the energy was clear. They were here for something, and most of them thought they already knew what it was. Rachel slipped into the seat beside me without a word. Clean, composed, a folder in her lap that matched mine. "Walter's here," she said quietly. I glanced toward the side wall. He stood near the back, arms crossed, watching the room like a man who'd seen this kind of thing play out before. "Good," I said. Rachel nodded once. "Let her start," she added. Up front, Diane tapped the microphone lightly. The room settled. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice steady, controlled. "I know this meeting was called on short notice, but the situation we're addressing affects everyone here." She clicked a remote. The projector lit up behind her. A slide appeared. Clean graphics, bold text. Maintaining community standards. She moved through it smoothly. Property values, visual consistency, shared responsibility, then the shift. "Recently," she continued, "we've encountered a situation involving a lakeside property that has failed to meet these standards. No name. Still didn't need one. But more concerning," she said, "is the refusal to engage with the association in good faith." A few heads nodded. I didn't move. She clicked again. Photos appeared on the screen. My house. Angles that made it look unfinished. Cropped shots that cut out context. Close-ups of wiring mid-installation, taken before inspections were completed. "Unapproved modifications," she said. "Potential safety risks." I felt the room shift slightly. That was the move. Not just about money, about making me look like a liability. Rachel leaned slightly toward me. "Wait," she said under her breath. Diane continued. "When individuals choose to operate outside established systems," she said, "it doesn't just affect them. It impacts everyone around them." Another click. A chart this time. Property value projections. Arrows dipping downward. Manufactured. Clean enough to look real. "This is what happens when standards aren't enforced," she said. The room murmured. She stepped forward slightly, letting the silence settle. "We've attempted to resolve this privately," she said. "But without cooperation, we're left with limited options." There it was. Framed clean, reasonable authority, unreasonable target. I could feel the weight of it pressing through the room. And then she made her mistake. "Mr. Caldwell is here tonight," she said, turning slightly, her eyes finding me. "And I'd like to give him the opportunity to explain his position." The room shifted again. All eyes. On me. Rachel didn't look at me, just gave a small nod. I stood. No rush, no hesitation. Walked forward through the rows, past people who were now watching closely, some curious, some already decided. I stopped a few feet from the table, close enough to be heard, far enough to not stand beside her. Diane stepped back slightly, giving me the space like it was part of her plan. It wasn't. I didn't look at the screen, didn't acknowledge the slides. I looked at the room. Then I spoke. "My name's Ethan Caldwell," I said. "I bought the property on Blackwood Shore 8 months ago, restored it myself. Permitted, inspected, approved by the county. Simple, clear. No emotion. A few heads tilted. I reached into my folder and pulled out the first document. Held it up just enough. "This is my deed," I said. Filed, recorded, clean. No mention of an HOA. I set it on the table in front of me. Then the second. "County boundary map," I said. "Shows the association line." I tapped it once. My property isn't inside it. A murmur, small, but real. Diane didn't move, didn't interrupt. She was waiting. So I kept going. "Over the last week," I said, "I've received multiple notices. Fines totaling over $100,000. Threats of liens. Inspections that had no jurisdiction." I paused. Let that sit. Then, "I also looked at other properties," I added. "Turner, Mitchell." That landed. Different reaction this time. People shifting in their seats, recognizing names. "Same pattern," I said. "Same timeline. Same pressure." Now Diane stepped forward slightly. "Those situations are unrelated," she said. I didn't look at her. "Are they?" I asked. Then I reached into the folder again. But this time, I didn't pull the amendment. Not yet. I held that line, because this wasn't the moment. This was the setup. I looked back at the room. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to understand something." A beat. Then, if my property was never part of this association, why am I being treated like it is? Silence. Real silence. Not controlled, not planned. The kind that comes when something doesn't add up anymore. Diane opened her mouth to respond. And that's when I knew. The room wasn't fully hers anymore, and it was about to slip. Diane stepped forward, trying to recover the rhythm she'd built. "The association's authority isn't determined by a single document," she said, voice tightening just enough to notice. "It's based on established practice, long-term enforcement, and community alignment." It sounded strong, until you actually listened to it. I didn't respond right away. Let the words sit in the air. Then I reached into the folder again. This time I pulled it. The amendment. I didn't raise my voice, didn't change my tone, just held the paper up where the front row could see it. 1978, I said. Amendment to the original HOA charter. A few people leaned forward. I set it down on the table, sliding it toward the edge where it caught the light. Signed by Harold Whitaker, I added. That hit. Not loud, but sharp. Diane's expression didn't change immediately, but her posture did. Slight shift, weight redistributed, because she knew the name mattered. I continued. This amendment states that properties existing before the HOA was formed, and not included in the original boundary, are permanently exempt from all assessments, enforcement, and obligations unless the owner gives written consent. I tapped the paper once. My property qualifies under every part of that. The room went quiet again. Not confused this time. Focused. Rachel stepped forward beside me, picking up the document. Verified copy from county records, she said. Filed, indexed, and cross-referenced with the original charter. She turned it slightly so more of the room could see. This isn't interpretation, she added. It's recorded fact. A voice from the middle rose. Then why's he getting billed? That broke the seal. More voices followed. Yeah, that don't make sense. I thought those lots weren't included. I remember hearing something about that years ago. Diane raised a hand, trying to regain control. This document, she started, does not reflect current enforcement policy. Policy doesn't override recorded law, Rachel said calmly. Diane turned toward her, eyes narrowing. You're not a member of this association, she said. You don't? I'm a licensed property attorney in this state, Rachel cut in. And I know the difference between policy and authority. That landed harder. Diane hesitated. Just long enough. And in that gap, Walter stepped forward from the side. He didn't hurry, didn't force attention. But when he spoke, the room listened. I surveyed those boundary lines in '89, he said. Reconfirmed them again in 2006. He gestured toward the map still sitting on the table. That line hasn't moved, he said. And that property, he nodded toward me, was never inside it. Another shift in the room. He wasn't arguing, he was confirming, and people trusted that. Diane tried again. This is being misrepresented, she said. The association has operated under these standards for decades, and only enforced them selectively, I said. That stopped her. I reached down and pulled out the timelines, laid them out side by side. Turner, I said, tapping the first. Mitchell. I moved my hand across the pages. Same pattern. No enforcement for years. Then sudden violations, fines, pressure. I looked up at the room. They didn't suddenly become non-compliant, I said. They became targets. The word hung there, heavy, because now it wasn't just about me. It was about a pattern people were starting to recognize. A man near the back stood up. I remember Turner, he said. He fought that for months. Another voice. They said his place was unsafe. Then he sold, didn't he? Murmurs building now. Not controlled, not directed. Real. Diane's composure cracked for the first time. You're drawing conclusions without full context, she said, sharper now. No, I replied. I'm connecting documented events. Rachel stepped forward again. And if you'd like full context, she said, we can discuss the legal implications of enforcing fees on properties explicitly exempt under your own charter. Diane didn't answer. Couldn't. Because there wasn't a version of this where she came out clean. At the edge of the room, a uniform shifted. Sheriff Cole Dawson stepped forward. He hadn't said a word until now. Didn't need to. Let's keep this clear, he said, voice even. If there are claims being made against a property, financial or otherwise, they need to be backed by legal authority. He looked at the document on the table. From what I'm hearing, he continued, that authority's in question. That was it. That was the break. The room changed completely. People weren't listening to Diane anymore. They were looking at the paper, at the map, at each other, recalculating. Diane took a step back. Just one. But it was enough. Because now she wasn't leading the room. She was trying to hold on to it. This isn't over, she said, voice tighter than before. There are still processes. Then we'll follow them, Rachel said. Calm, certain, through the proper channels. No argument left in that. Just procedure. Which meant time. Which meant exposure. I looked around the room one last time. Faces that had been closed off earlier, now open, questioning, some even nodding, not toward me, toward the truth sitting on that table. I didn't need to say anything else. Didn't need to push it further, because the moment had already turned, and everyone in that room felt it. The same system that had been used quietly for years had just been dragged into the light, and it wasn't holding up, not even close. The meeting didn't end with applause. It ended with movement. People standing, talking in low voices, turning toward each other instead of toward Diane. The kind of shift you don't control once it starts. Diane stayed where she was for a moment, hands resting on the table like she was deciding whether to push back or walk away. She chose neither. She gathered her papers slowly, avoiding eye contact, and stepped back from the center of the room. Not defeated, but not in charge anymore either. That was enough. I didn't follow her, didn't say anything else because everything that needed to be said was already on that table. The documents, the timeline, the pattern. Rachel stepped beside me as the room continued to break into smaller conversations. "That's it," she said quietly. "Not yet," I replied. She nodded once. "Not officially," she agreed, "but it's done." Walter approached from the side, hands still in his pockets. "Took longer than it should have," he said. "Usually does," I replied. He looked around the room. "Difference is," he added, "this time people saw it happen. That mattered, because before tonight, it had always been quiet, individual, isolated. Now it wasn't. The sheriff passed by us on his way out, giving a small nod. No words. Didn't need them. Outside, the gravel lot was louder than when I'd arrived. Groups forming near trucks and SUVs, conversations carrying across the open space. Some looked at me differently now, not like an outsider, like someone who'd forced something into the open. I didn't stay long. Didn't need to. The drive back to the lake felt different. Same road, same turns. But the weight that had been sitting on my chest all week was gone. Not completely, but enough. The next morning, the letter came. Not certified this time. Just regular mail. HOA letterhead. I opened it at the table. Notice of withdrawal. All outstanding fines. Void. All enforcement actions. Suspended. All claims against the property. Dismissed. No apology. No admission. Just a quiet step back. I set it down next to the rest of the stack. For a second, I thought about keeping it all. Every notice. Every threat. But I didn't move them. Not yet. Because I knew something else was coming. By the end of the week, it did. A second notice. This one public. Posted at the same board by the gas station. HOA leadership restructuring. Diane Whitaker had resigned. Effective immediately. Interim board appointed pending review. No details. No explanation. But it didn't need one. People already knew. Mark called that afternoon. "Did you see it?" he asked. "Yeah." Pause. "Whole thing's shifting," he said. "They're talking about reviewing past enforcement cases." "Good," I replied. Another pause. "Turner might have a shot at getting something back," he added. I looked out toward the lake. That'd be a start. We hung up. I stepped out onto the porch again, same spot where this started. Coffee in hand, steam rising into the cool air. The boards felt solid under my boots, the railing smooth where I'd finished it. Out on the water, the surface moved slow, catching the morning light the same way it had the day Diane first pulled into my drive. Only now, it was quiet for the right reasons. No pressure, no noise underneath it. Just space. I leaned forward slightly, resting my arms on the railing. 8 months of work had brought the house back. But that wasn't the real fight. The real fight had been proving something simpler. That ownership isn't defined by who speaks the loudest, or who prints the most official-looking paper. It's defined by what's actually written, what's recorded, what holds up when someone finally checks. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence settle. They'd tried to turn this place into something it wasn't, tried to pull it into a system it never belonged to, and for a while, they almost made it real. But truth doesn't need volume. It just needs to be put in the right place at the right time. I looked out across the water one more time. Same lake, same land. Nothing changed. Except now, nobody was pretending it belonged to anyone else.
What I learned out on this is simple, but it took a while to really understand it. Just because something is written on paper doesn't make it true. What matters is that actually records, verifies, and break it out. If I hadn't slowed it down, checked the records, and stood on what were real instead of reaching to pressures, I could lost something that was rightfully mine without ever realizing it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't pushing back louder. It's standing still long enough to see clearly and then letting the truth speak for itself. Learn, work, and dignity. Two things don't come from approval. They come from knowing that you are pure and being willing to stand on it when it counts. If you ever use something like this HOA property is used or just someone trying to tell you what you want, when now better drop a yes down in the comment. I read every one of them and I know a lot of these stories don't get told. And if you want more real story like this about their people standing there around, doing things the right way and holding it onto what matter, go ahead and surprise. There are coming and I will see you in the next one.